I have started a previous video of mine with a simple statement. Ryan Murphy is a person that exists. Now, after sitting down and watching Scream Queen Season 1, I would like to present a similar statement, slightly amended to fit the theme of this video. Ryan Murphy is a person that exists, but at what cost? Before we get into the video, I just wanted to thank you guys for participating in my Halloween series all month long. Today, my final costume is the iconic Fran Fine from The Nanny. I'm in a skin-tight cheetah print dress and I cannot breathe, but that is more than okay. I'm also going to be giving a spoiler warning for Scream Queen Season 1, and we will only be talking about Season 1 because I figured that's more than enough. Scream Queens is a satirical, over-the-top, campy slasher comedy that aired on Fox from 2015 to 2016. After going back and watching Season 1, I'm genuinely in awe of the fact that this aired on cable TV and not on a streaming service, but I'm guessing that after the smash hit that was Glee, Fox was willing to throw boatloads of money at showrunner Ryan Murphy to try and recreate that same magic. Murphy confirmed a couple things about the show's development, mainly that somebody would die every episode in an overarching search for the show's main killer, and that unlike his other hit at the time, American Horror Story, the series would not be an anthology. Those who survived would ideally move on to Season 2. The show itself is a campy take on a whodunit type mystery, following several characters who live and work at a wealthy college campus ruled by Greek life, the sorority Kappa Kappa Tau. All is well at Kappa, led by their ruthless president Chanel Oberlin, played by Emma Roberts, until the school's dean, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, swears to take them down, while bitches around them simultaneously start getting axed by an anonymous killer called the Red Devil. This show has a lot of characters and a lot of big names: Emma Roberts, Jamie Lee Curtis, Ariana Grande, Nick Jonas, Lea Michele, Keke Palmer, Billie Lourd, and Abigail Breslin, just to name a few. The show juggles all of them, plus a few others that I didn't name, as they try to figure out the identity of the Red Devil, maintain their status in the sorority, and of course, stay alive. Chanel and her cronies, who do have real names but are just referred to as Chanel's numbered minions, are trying to maintain control over Kappa despite a new requirement by the dean to accept anyone as a pledge. This brings Grace, played by Skylar Samuels, and Zayday, played by Keke Palmer, into the fold, with their mission being to change the toxic culture of the sorority from the inside out. Grace is sort of our protagonist if you don't count Chanel. She's actively doing the most work to solve the killer's identity, along with Pete, played by Diego Boneta, an investigative journalist because, of course, trying to expose the shady and abusive behavior that runs rampant within Kappa. I don't comment on this often, but the show's aesthetics are absolutely on point. Every scene is so colorful and well put together, from the production design to the styling of the characters. Additionally, I like that the show doesn't take itself too seriously. They're definitely throwing a lot at you, and as a viewer, it's a lot to take in, with the punchy dialogue, the over-the-top slapstick-type comedy, the absurd depictions of violence, and the unrealistic scenarios that all definitely require some sort of suspension of disbelief. And I, generally speaking, am okay with that, as long as it's good. And the first few episodes were solidly good to me. We as the audience have to put in the work to get to know not only these characters in present day, but their connection to a flashback type story that played out at a Kappa party 10 years earlier. And out of all the characters, there are some great ones. Let's start with the main talking point here. Emma Roberts absolutely kills it, no pun intended, as Chanel. She is ruthless and hilarious and unhinged and delivers some of the most insane dialogue that I'm not sure would work at all if it wasn't her saying the lines. She is fully committed to the character, and she always looks great. I'm really glad that she was the focal point of this story and cast. I don't think it would have worked with many other actresses. The other main Chanel's number 3 and 5, were also really great. Abigail Breslin does a great job as expected, and I was really surprised by Billie Lourd, who has some of the funniest lines in this show. Their dynamic all worked really well because, I mean, you expect what it's going to be to some extent once you realize it's clearly a play on Heathers, but it's new and dynamic enough to keep it interesting. Jamie Lee Curtis is a goddamn national treasure. She easily could have just phoned it in for this whole thing, but she doesn't. She's so charismatic and weird, and is probably my favorite character in this show. Ariana and Nick Jonas are not in the show for long, but when they are, they're actually both pretty cute and charming. And Keke Palmer as Zayday should have been the protagonist of this whole series. Keke has been underrated for decades now, and I'm glad that she's finally getting her flowers for Nope, but she is such a light when she's acting alongside the other girls in the cast. Her character is funny and charming, and she has clear goals and intentions with the sorority, and is not insufferable like her partner in crime. Now, here is my first main critique of Scream Queen Season 1. I do not like Grace. Grace rushes Kappa with the intention of feeling closer to her dead mom, who was a big part of the organization in the 90s. She also has an overprotective dad who is very sexy, and that is probably the only good thing that I will say about him in this video. As I said earlier, Grace hooks up literally and figuratively with Pete Martinez, an outsider who everyone pretends is weird even though he's clearly also very conventionally attractive, to try and solve the murders and expose Kappa for a piece in the school newspaper. Side note, as a real journalist, I am so tired of the school newspaper expose trope, but I don't have time for a tangent on that here. Anyway, Grace is determined to figure out who the killer is, but she's also trying to figure out her whole connection to the 1995 Kappa party, and there's just not much here that's likable about her, guys. You could take her out of the whole story, and I don't really think anything would be much different. She's the audience surrogate who is finding information as we find it out for the first time. But as her character, she is not that interesting and is honestly a little too preachy for my taste. The other character I am not super fond of is Hester, later Chanel No. 6, played by Lea Michele. Hester is super weird and off-putting from the jump, talking constantly about her obsession with death and murder, and is often switching sides and alliances in the ongoing mystery with no real rhyme or reason. One day she's calling Chanel mom and sniffing her clothes or whatever, and the next she's trying to turn the other Chanels against her and trying to take Kappa for herself. I think Lea Michele did a good job as the character, especially because it's not the type of role that we normally see her in, but I really hate what they do with her by the end of the season. Rewind explainer, because if you haven't seen this show, the next part won't make sense. If you have seen the show and you already are aware of the 1995 plotline, you can skip ahead to this time code in the video. In 1995, one of the Kappas gives birth to 2 babies in a bathtub. The other Kappas refuse to help her even though she's postpartum and covered in blood. They leave her there and come back to find her dead, and the dean helps get rid of the body and cover up the incident. Amy, one of the other Kappas, ends up caring for the babies until her suicide from PTSD over the incident. Amy's sister Gigi then has a mental breakdown and raises the bathtub babies from birth in an asylum, training them to be serial killers and get revenge on Kappa once they're old enough to be in college. We eventually find out that there are 3 Red Devils all working in tandem with each other, with Gigi calling the shots and manipulating them while getting close with Grace's dad. The first Red Devil to be revealed is Boone, played by Nick Jonas, one of the bathtub babies from the 1995 incident. This mostly makes sense within the context of the show, it's not really hidden at all, and I guess it's fine at face value. The second revealed Red Devil is Pete, which doesn't make much sense. He explains to Grace in this dramatic confrontation that the original Devils were about to kill him until he agreed to help them out, and that he viewed himself as the good guy because the Devils were pursuing the noteworthy cause of taking down Greek life. Then he dies before being able to reveal the final Devil. The third Red Devil is revealed to be Hester, the other bathtub baby. Now at first, I was more than ready to praise Ryan Murphy for letting Emma Roberts take the lead in a role that Lea Michele surely could have played herself, and giving Lea more of a comedic relief side character role. But then, plot twist, we find out that the weird, quirky girl obsessed with murder is the final murderer? Not only that, but she gets away with it by framing all of the Chanels and blackmailing the dean. She presents made-up evidence that doesn't really make sense, blaming all 3 Chanels for the murders. And then Grace and Zayde, the 2 smartest characters in the show, just sort of take it at face value. They don't question, anything she says. It just felt like the show was tired of its own premise by the last episode, and even the characters that were so hellbent on solving the mystery gave up in the end because they needed everything wrapped up in time. The series ends with Grace and Zayde taking over Kappa with Hester, and the Chanels getting sentenced to an insane asylum. The ending was notoriously panned by fans of the show, and ultimately I think it suffered from 2 main problems. One, the show's interpretation of death and consequence leave little to be desired. I understand that this whole thing was supposed to be an homage to the great slasher films of the day, and that everyone on screen is expendable, I get it, and that can be plenty of fun to watch. But death, the action of taking a person's life, is so inconsequential in this series that you pretty much get taken out of the whole thing entirely after you see it play out so many times. So many people die in this show, even ones that aren't connected to Kappa in any way. The new mascot dies, and that's never explained. Chanel straight up kills Miss Bean in the first episode in front of a ton of people, and nobody does anything about it. Gigi, who is connected to Kappa, is killed presumably by one of the other Red Devils, and that's never explained either. Now, I'm all for a gruesome slasher with fun and exciting tension and over-the-top deaths, but by the time this thing winds down, you don't really care about anybody dead or living. And that's a crucial part of the relationship between the audience and a show. It doesn't matter if the characters are bad people, you still have to kind of care about what happens to them and the consequences. And while Scream Queens is more concerned with things like the aesthetic and the slapstick, they really kind of fell short in the end with having the deaths or the killers create any actual significance for the viewer. The second main issue here is, I think, just a problem with this genre as it relates to the business of TV. Pretty Little Liars is another big example that comes to mind. If you create a murder mystery type show, you have to understand that fans, aren't stupid. In fact, they'll be analyzing the tiniest little details that you barely even thought of when creating this work. If you have an ending, an idea of who the killer will be, great. Show us how you got there and make it make sense. Showrunners in this genre often get so wrapped up in throwing the audience off track that plot inconsistencies become way more of a glaring problem. If you don't have an ending and you don't know who the killer will be, don't just go for the subversion of expectations route for the sake of being clever. You don't win by fooling the audience, you just look unprepared. I think Scream Queens is the former. Ryan Murphy loves Lea Michele so much that there was no way she wasn't going to have a bigger role in this project than comedic relief creepy neck brace girl. That's fine, but make it make sense. Your audience deserves a coherent plotline that doesn't seem rushed to a nonsensical stopping point. Now, I'm actually working on a screenplay of this same genre. It's a slasher-type comedy that takes place at a college, and I'm not saying it's easy. With a mystery, there's a lot of threads to keep track of, but if you're Ryan goddamn Murphy, people sort of expect better from you, my guy. Other rapid-fire points about Scream Queens. Okay, Sam the predatory Les deserved better. Most of the dudes in this show annoyed me except for Chad. I thought he was hilarious. Zayday deserved a happy ending with the hot British guy. Grace's dad's whole involvement in this show was so weird and creepy, and I wish that it, wasn't a plot point at all. Niecy Nash's character was funny, but I didn't really understand why she was constantly trying to accuse Zayday of being the killer. Candle Girl bit it way too early. I would have loved to see more of her, and whoever kept dressing Grace in those dumbass hats should be fired. Thanks for watching, happy Halloween, and I'll see you next time.